So do y'all want to know what attraction at the Magic Kingdom that Drew Carey and his family sat at for an hour and a half? The answer may surprise you. Please stick around and find out.
With over 20 years of experience serving as a cast member for the Walt Disney World Resort, welcome to Less is More Disney.
If you are a podcast listener and an avid Disney Parks fan, then do I have a podcast for you. Our friends over at DL Weekly, Teresa and Tage, feature episodes full of fun Disney stories, great park advice, and interviews with cast members from past and present. If you're interested, find their link below in my description. That I saw Drew Carey in person was in December of 2001. It was the night of Walt's 100th birthday celebration press event over at Disney MGM Studios. Now for this celebration, it was a huge celebration. They had a giant sorcerer hat that was 122 feet tall that was built in front of the Chinese theater at that park to symbolize Walt's 100th birthday and his achievements in movie and television and animation. So that night, that was the grand finale for this week-long press event where they had all these A-list celebrities flown in to be a part of this celebration and press from all over the world. Back then, I wasn't a VIP tour guide, but I wanted to get my foot in the door, so I called the department to see if I can work that event, just so I can get a glimpse of what a VIP tour guide life was like and working in those big press events. Let me tell you, when Disney throws a party, they really know how to throw a party. And this party itself was probably the best and biggest spectacular party that I've ever been to, that Disney's ever thrown. And believe me, I've been through a lot of them, but this was the best one. They had big celebrities like Julie Andrews and Roy E. Disney, and all these Disney legends and executives there as well. Well, that night I got to work the front door of the Hollywood Brown Derby restaurant. Ken Davis, who was one of my favorite VIP tour coordinators, got to put me in that position where I got to make sure that the celebrities and their invited guests were allowed into the restaurant and no one else, because this is a place where they got to kind of digress from the crowd but also have dinner and just relax in there. From where I was standing at the door, I got to see Julie Andrews coming in. I saw Roy E. Disney, Michael Eisner, who was our CEO back then. And at one point in the evening, I got to see Jodie Benson, who's the voice of Ariel, talk to Paige O'Hara, who was the voice of Belle, just having a conversation on their own on the side. And then on the other side, I saw Gilbert Gottfried joking around with Ernie Sabella. Ernie Sabella was the voice of Pumbaa from The Lion King, and Gilbert Gottfried was the voice of Iago from the Aladdin. From where I was standing, I also got to watch the parade where Drew Carey was the Grand Marshal for the Stars and Motor Cars parade that night. And then I also got to see the stage where the 122-foot sorcerer hat was placed. And after the parade ended, Drew Carey got on stage and he started the show, the ceremony for the event. He got to speak about Walt Disney and the achievements of the Walt Disney Company, and then he introduced Michael Eisner, who was the CEO of the company. And then at one point during the celebration, Julie Andrews came, introduced Mickey Mouse, and then Mickey Mouse had his own moment, which was very a heartfelt moment of the night, where Mickey Mouse was saying a little bit about his buddy and friend, Walt Disney, and he looked up to the sky and he said, "I sure do miss you, Walt." And that kind of brought a lot of tears into that event that night. After that, hundreds of Disney characters came on stage as they started that big celebration finale with fireworks, huge fireworks, igniting all over Disney MGM Studios. So that was my glimpse of VIP tours, as well as how Disney throws a huge party. Also that night I got to meet Disney legend Virginia Davis, who was from the Alice comedies. For those of you who do not know, she was the actress that was in Disney's first live action short. Her name was Virginia Davis, and it was from Alice comedies. So fast forward to a couple years later, back in 2017, I was the tour guide for Drew Carey. Me and along with my fellow tour guide, Jeremy, we were assigned to be part of Drew and his family's tour. So as I mentioned in my other episode, as a VIP tour guide, before I meet a family or a celebrity, I get that butterfly in my stomach. I get anxieties and hoping that this family will be nice and easy to take around. And I was to spend a week, Jeremy and I were to spend a week with this family, taking them around Walt Disney World. We met up with them at the Four Seasons Resort at the Walt Disney property. And the moment that we met them, we just fell in love with them. They were so nice, very welcoming, very humble. The kids were just so excited to be there. We had Drew and Drew's girlfriend at that time, Amy, and his family members. We had Connor, we had Nicole, Mike, Preston, Kennedy, Michelle, Zach, Marilyn, and Al. And I remembered all their names because they were very, very memorable and very friendly, and we just had a great time with them. So if you know Drew Carey, you know that he is a big Disney fan. He's been to the Disney park several times over the last few years. He even had a show on ABC called The Drew Carey Show. So he was a big part of the Disney family. So it was fun taking him and his family around because they know how to have fun at Disney. When we go to the parks, he would point out the different hidden Mickeys that he knows of, and some of them I've never even knew of. One in particular that him and I had a fun time finding was just the two of us, and we were at the Italy Pavilion at Epcot, and he told me about this hidden Mickey on one of the pillars in the structure. So him and I spent about 30 minutes finding this hidden Mickey on a pillar, and we finally found it. It was a king that was sculpted in one of the pillars holding a bowling ball that had 3 circles. So he was a kid again when he went to the parks. There was one that I showed him actually that he didn't even know of, and he thought this was the coolest hidden Mickey he's ever seen. So much that he posted it right on Instagram right after he found that hidden Mickey that I showed him. It was over at Disney's Hollywood Studios, and it is over at Star Wars Launch Bay. There was an exhibit of Star Wars model ships and different vehicles, and one of them in particular had a little window over at the cockpit of the spaceship. And if you take a photo with your phone or a camera with a flash onto the to the window of the flight deck, it'll have a photo or poster, a little poster of Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse dressed as Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia in there. I showed him that, and again, he immediately posted it on his Instagram, and I thought that was the coolest hidden Mickey too, as well. One of his favorite attractions that he enjoyed that we stayed for an hour and a half. I'm not kidding you. We stayed an hour and a half, him and his family and Jeremy and I, we sat there watching the show. It was at the Magic Kingdom called the Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor Comedy Club. And it was appropriate, right? Because he's a comedian. So when he thinks it was funny, it was hilarious. It's called the Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor Comedy Club over in Tomorrowland. So he's never heard of that attraction. So Jeremy and I, we brought him in and his family. And this is an attraction where the monsters from Monsters Inc. would interact with the audience members. And it was like a virtual type of interaction, and the monsters would joke around with the audience members and sometimes even tastefully make fun of the audience. And we got a front row seat on the left side of the theater. And after the first show, he said, "Can we just stay on to watch the next one?" So I asked the cast members at the attractions, and they allowed all 12 of us to stay put in that section. And after the second show, he enjoyed it so much that he wanted to stay for a third show. So we stayed all the way to a third show, and then we finally left. So that was pretty fun that he enjoyed that attraction, and it gave his seal of approval that that is a funny attraction to go to. After doing so many attractions and visiting all the parks, and they were there for 5 days. Drew wanted to do something that was outside of the box, outside of the norm of visiting the Disney parks and the attractions. So Jeremy got the idea of maybe taking the next day off, and we would go to do some of the recreational activities that Disney had to offer at the resorts. So Jeremy arranged for us to go bass fishing the next day over near Disney's Contemporary Resort in Bay Lake. And we also had horseback riding over at Disney's Fort Wilderness Resort and Campground. And then that night we got to go bowling over at Splitsville over at Disney Springs, which was pretty cool. We did things as a tour guide that are out of the norm of what we would normally do at the parks. So after a whole week of fun and adventure going to the Disney parks, the attractions, going on bass fishing together and horseback riding and bowling, the last day Drew and the family wanted to relax and had a day to themselves before Jeremy and I took them to the fireworks that night. I remember that day Drew Carey and Amy went to a skeleton museum. They went to visit a skeleton museum over in International Drive, and some of the family members decided to stay in at the resort and just hang out at the pool. But that night Jeremy and I picked them up and we took them to watch the fireworks at the Magic Kingdom for our grand finale for their vacation. They've never seen this particular fireworks show called Happily Ever After, but after the show ended, Nicole just teared up and summed up the vacation, saying that this was a great way to end their vacation and that was the best fireworks show they've ever seen, and I couldn't agree with her more. I can't help but to think about Drew Carey and our time together whenever I watch The Price is Right and I see him on TV. This has got to be probably one of the best tours I've ever had, and I still keep in touch with some of the family members to this day because they were just so loving to me. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and like, and I can't wait to share more adventures with you. Till next time.
We hoped you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching.